Hello, this is Brooks Whittington with halfwheel.com. For a while now, one of the holy grails of cigar cutter companies has been to produce a very functional cutter into the same product as a very functional knife. In 2014, a company named Le Fin Lame produced their first cutter, which you can see here. I reviewed this on the site last year. It is a massive cutter. It made extremely well, very, very large. And as a knife, it's wonderful. As a cigar cutter, it failed on many levels, and you can read that review if you'd like. In last year, the company decided to come out with a different version of that same cutter called Le Petit, which is right here. It is a smaller version of that cutter with a few differences that I'll get to in a moment. It is a physical cutter. Closed, it comes in at 115 millimeters. Fully open, this cutter measures 157 millimeters. Weight's about 60 grams, which is significantly less than I expected when I actually saw it. And it can cut a 50 ring gauge in half by putting a cigar right here in this half circle with a 23 millimeter opening. But it'll cut about a 70 ring gauge with a cap, just the cap off with 70 ring gauge or so, which I've done multiple times, and it works like a charm. Now, the blade itself is made with 14C28N stainless steel. Our version here, the exterior, is actually made of micarta composite material. There are other versions, quite a few other versions. We paid about $120 with the sheath as part of the online campaign, but at retail they come in at about $140 without the sheath. All right, so in terms of operation, the Le Petit functions in about the same manner as any number of other single guillotine blades. First thing you do is open up the blade, which in this specific instance you do by pushing down on the lever. That opens everything up. Nice, he goes either halfway all the way across, or you can go as little or as much as you want. Now, when you're actually cutting a cigar, what you want to do is make sure that the base of the cutter is in the palm of your hand here to support it. And the tip of your thumb is on the tip of the blade here. And when you actually have a cigar cap, you're going to put it in the opening here, and it's going to push through as you push pressure on that blade with your thumb, and it's just going to push through and actually cut through that cap. Now, the cigar cutter can actually be used in either your right or your left hand, and either way is correct according to the company. However, you have to use it in the correct manner both ways. So, essentially what that means is that the blade, if your cutter is in your left hand, if you're holding it in your left hand, the blade with the actual beveled edge is going to be on the side that your cap, the smaller end, is going to be cut and it's going to fall. While the side with the logo, as you see here, is actually going to be on the same side as the remainder of the cigar that you're going to put into your mouth is left over. So you take the base of the cutter, put it in your palm of your hand, you put your thumb on the tip of the blade, which in this instance is facing towards you. You take the cap of the cigar, you put it into the opening, making sure that the logo is on the side with the larger piece of the cigar that you're going to smoke. And you push through in a nice, even, and clean motion. And that leaves you with a very nice and a very clean cut. So, if you want to use the cutter in your right hand, you would do the same thing, but reversed. You basically face it the other way. You put the base into the palm of your hand. You put the thumb on the tip of the blade, which is now facing away from you. And you're going to make sure, again, that the smaller end of the cap that's being cut off is going to fall, is going to be on the same side as the beveled edge, while the larger part that you're going to smoke is on the same side as the logo, as you can see here. You open it up, put it in the palm of your hand here. You make sure that you have just enough that you want to take off, and push through with a nice, even, clean motion. And you have a nice, even cut. Now, I did it both ways, used the cutter both ways to make sure that either way was functional. And while I didn't notice that much of a difference at all in terms of the quality of the cuts, I prefer the cutter to be in my left hand and the cigar in my right hand. Now, as part of this review, I think it'd be very, very helpful to go over exactly how the newer Le Petit matches up with the older, larger cutter. Few things that are really, really noticeable about this is the fact that the larger cutter is actually, as I said, much larger. As you can see, it's this massive cutter compared to the small one, the new one. It is heavier. It is thicker. It is the blade is massive on it. In fact, the blade is pretty much almost the size of the actual smaller cutter itself, and it shows when you're trying to cut cigars. You can't put this thing inside your pocket and just forget about it. It's way, way too big for that. The smaller one you can very easily carry around in your pocket. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to. It doesn't feel like you're just jangling around, and you can notice it every time. It is not even close to as noticeable. Secondly, the fact is that because of the design element that they added, instead of having this closed circle here, which does not actually allow you to see how it is, how much of the cap you're actually cutting. This new semicircle open, you actually can see exactly what you're doing with it. And so you can see there, you can see exactly how much that cut is going to take off, as opposed to the circle, the closed circle, which does not. And finally, because of how this is designed, when you're actually pushing down on the larger one, the wingspan that you have to reach, it's impossible to get all the way up and still keep your palm with the fingers where you're trying to support the base straight. It's just not as easy of a situation when you're able to do that, as opposed to the smaller one, which is very, very easy to see exactly how much you're going to take off. And the wingspan, as you can tell, is much, much, much more agreeable when you're trying to actually keep this thing steady and keep it straight. So after about a month of using the Le Petit for every review cigar that I smoked, I've got some notable good things and some bad things that I would pass along about the cutter itself. First really good thing is the fact that it can be used as both a cutter and a knife. The dual functionality is extremely impressive. The knife is very, very sharp, had no issues with dulling or anything, not even close, in the time that I was using it. I didn't use it for a knife a lot because, we're a cigar blog and not a knife blog, but it is definitely something that you can use, and I can imagine it would take just about anything that was thrown at it. Another great thing is the fact that you can cut up to 70 ring gauge cigars with it. Not a lot of cutters, especially these knife cutter combinations, can cut up to 70 ring gauge. This one can. When you're actually cutting the cigar, you actually can see exactly where you're cutting because of the fact that it's not a full circle. It's actually enclosed circle. It's actually an open semicircle. So you can see exactly what you're cutting and how you're cutting the cap, which is also gives you a lot more stability in terms of where you need to put the pressure, and you don't have to guess as much. The construction of the actual cutter is excellent. There's no problems in my end with nicking or anything on that regard with the exterior. It's really, really great construction, and it's made with really quality materials. You can definitely tell. Last thing, a really great thing, is the fact that this tool that comes with it does allow you to actually loosen and tighten the blade. So you can actually make it as loose as you can see there. It's quite a bit looser, or as tight as you want. It gives you a lot more control over what you're doing, much tighter. So if you're going to use it more as a knife or something, you probably want to make it a little tighter. This same tool allows you to actually open up the cutter and actually change out those blades. It gives you quite a bit of control over what you do in terms of a blade, and you can customize it however you want in terms of whatever options are available for that. Now, having said all of that, there are some bad things about the cutter that I found, starting with the price. $150 is quite a bit of money for any cutter, but it's definitely a lot of money for a cutter that only performs perfectly about 80% of the time. Now, to be fair, 10% of the 20% that I had problems with were very minor issues. They were, little pieces of tobacco left over, or small wrapper issues, that kind of thing. Only about 10% of the cuts that I had some, problems with cracked wrappers or cracked tobacco or things of that nature. But it is a lot of money to pay for something that isn't 95% accurate 95% of the time you get a good cut. Second thing is the fact that it is still awkward when you're using it. It's definitely better than the bigger one. It's astoundingly, easier to use and more stable. But when you're actually using the cutter, it takes time to open it up and put the cigar in and make sure that you're cutting straight, go all the way through, and that kind of thing. Some people will enjoy the process. I have come to like the process for this specific cutter. But it is definitely not just something you can just pick up, clip off and be done with it. It's definitely something that takes more time than that. Third thing that I had a problem with is the fact that while I haven't actually tested this, this is specifically a blade, a very long blade in terms of what the TSA believes, and they probably will take it away from you if you try to take it onto a plane. So traveling with it, probably not the best idea in terms of taking it onto a plane or something of that nature. So in the end, can I recommend the Le Petit? The answer is yes, I can. There's no doubt that it has a few issues. Number one is the price. I mean, it's hard to justify a price like that in terms of just a numbers game. And it does have problems with a few of the cuts that I used it on. But it's in the end, it's a very capable cutter, very cool looking, very well made, and you can use it as a knife, very sharp blade, as well as a cutter. It's easy to carry around, and it's something that I think that it's very cool to be able to show off and use. In the end, the company actually fixed a lot of the problems I had with the first one, and it makes it a very usable cigar cutter that I can recommend if you're willing to put out the money. So, for halfwheel.com, this is Brooks Whittington. If you need any other cigar reviews or cigar news or anything cigar related, just take a look at halfwheel.com.